Hello and welcome to Dynamics Update. We are still in beautiful Portorož in Slovenia. And as I said, my colleague here is Gustav. Hello.
Hello, Johan. It's very nice to be here. Unfortunately, inside now, so we'll hopefully get outside soon.
You should say we're at the beach.
Of course, I might be fooled by not having any sounds in the background.
No waves. I can add that in post.
Yeah, it's a very nice little podcast room they set up for us, to be honest. So it's not bad, but it's just not outside.
Yes, but since we're here, we are having trying to have a lot of guests.
Yes.
So in this case, this is a guy who I know from the internets. He's been helping me struggle with dual write a bit because he has made a tool. Hi Max, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing good, thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
And so I'm the internet guy.
Yeah, exactly.
You're the internet guy.
Of tubes. Yeah.
You are the internet, basically.
Yeah, definitely.
So it actually talks a bit about how important the community is, because I actually got in touch with you through a mutual acquaintance of ours who referred me to you because I had issues. So, but
you have many issues.
Know a little bit more about who you are.
Yeah, sure. So my name Max Sentchell. I'm based in Germany, working for Microsoft as a technical architect in the EMEA region, basically. Working for ISD, I think I mentioned it right. And we basically also do implementations for customers like other partners do. And in that opportunities, we also are able to do things on the side, and like the tool which you have used and we had connection with was basically a result of some of the stuff we did in the field.
So very cool.
So what the tool actually does for you who haven't tried it, I highly recommend you to try it, especially if you're doing dual write things. What it actually does is that it saves and compares and deploys configuration of dual write. So you can actually use it to manage dual write configurations in different customers, in different environments.
Yeah, okay, nice.
So if you build a configuration in your dev environment, you can use Max's tool to actually package it, save it for later, but you can also use it to deploy to like test to production and so on. And it's also usable through Azure DevOps pipeline, which is a fantastic thing.
Great. So what's the name of the tool for all the listeners out there?
On GitHub, it's called Do Write Automations. The tool itself is called DW Helper. I just that was the first name which came in my mind. I thought to change it still, but hey-ho.
Exactly.
Who changes it afterwards?
Right? DW, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And the whole tool was probably an outcome of desperation. I was engaged in a project. I had to start a lot of maps, many environments. And back in the days, you could still relink that environment with any Dataverse environment.
Yeah.
I remember these times. Like nowadays, it's just reset link.
More strict, yeah.
And I had to start them, and I was like, okay. That manual stuff, I get quite fed up about repetitive tasks. So I was okay, there must be another way to do this. So I went in basically in the F12 in Edge into the network traffic, and then just see what's going to happen when I click the buttons of start and stop. And that's how I started it fast with a command line tool, like quick and dirty, see if it works.
Yeah.
And then I ended up adding more stuff. So and now you can basically use it for a lot of things. And also the most painful ones are after relinking, setting up the maps all the time. It's like really beneficial. You just have your configuration. It's based on configurations, and then you just go to run it. And what most people don't know, like when you click the first time into a map, it actually initializes that. So even though you would go click on it and start, it might be that it fails the first time because you didn't click into the map. So it does all of that stuff. And also if you have custom integration keys on top of the default maps, it also applies them as well.
Okay, very nice.
So it extracts everything.
So one of the good things I think with the tool is that it actually understands the sequence of mappings that you need to enable. So usually you don't have 1 or 2 maps, you have 80 or 90 maps that you need to enable.
Yeah.
And the fact that it actually understands in which sequence you need to enable them is also really, really important, because understanding exactly how to push it and so on, it's really good as well.
Yeah, especially for initial sync. I think if you just, pause maps and start them again or stop and start, it doesn't matter so much. But as soon as you start initial sync, it's going to be a problem, because when you start the first time with DualWrite, and even if it's just 20 or 30 maps, you want to go to customers, you want to start them, and then you get like 500 messages like, okay, there's no customer groups, there's no price group, there's nothing. So you go like the chain down from customers to the lower ones, and to try to figure out what it is. It also shows that, I think, when you click on start, it shows the related maps.
Yes.
But often there's maps you don't need, so it's not always 100% clear.
There are some maps that are actually deprecated from being used, so you shouldn't start them.
Yeah,
even though they are in the UI.
I love how this is like a dual write scenario. I haven't worked that much with dual writes, which I'm very thankful for. Whenever I run into an issue, I check with Johan. But I love that you working at Microsoft. So I mean, us working outside of Microsoft as partners. Tackle the issue the same way. Like, okay, I open up network traffic here. I'm trying to like understand how this works without like reverting to calling the product team. You always want to analyze how does this work at the core, right? To understand that. So it's very cool that you, while like inside of Microsoft, also tackles the problems the same way and provides us with a tool to make it easier. So that's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of. I think that DualWrite gets a bad reputation because most people, what they have heard about DualWrite is that it's bad, it doesn't work, it's crappy. And I actually think that it works really well, but you need to understand how it works in order. It's the same thing that if you walk into a car and the direction is on the other side of the steering wheel, then you would probably say that the car doesn't work very well because it's not what you're used to. No. And DualWrite is the same way, that it's not that it's not working bad, it's that it's working not as you expect it to work. Because I tend to say that to Gustav, that people are used to how integrations work. Yeah. And DualWrite doesn't behave as a regular integration, because it actually syncs database fields, which is sort of a big no-no when you build integrations. You should never sync to the database, because you should do things with a JSON message through an integration endpoint. But this doesn't do that, and that means that you need to treat it differently. But I also think that the big win with the tool is that DualWrite tends to be quite time consuming, because, as you say, the customer is like, so can we just turn off DualWrite? And they really don't understand the implication of turning off DualWrite for like an hour, because it means that all of a sudden your databases are no longer in sync. So you basically need to resync the databases once again, because you don't know what happened during that hour. So it's easy enough to turn it off, but there are consequences.
Yeah, and that's right. Like to the point you said, like it's once it's running, it's running very stable, in my opinion, and often depends on what user side you have. The FNO users and you have the CE users. Most of the time, when they are in a transaction, like they're updating a customer and they get an error message, then it says DualWrite error, and then basically DualWrite is blamed for it, even though it's not
business logic on the other side.
Yeah, DualWrite is just the connector in between. It's like it's doing no business logic, nothing.
It's really transparent.
Yeah. So if the error, what users often don't understand, if the error appears, the error is actually not in DualWrite. It's the process error on the other end. So either finance operations or Dataverse. In very rare cases, it's like in the middle if you maybe have a value map missing or something like that.
Yeah, and usually you have like a dependency data point that is missing. So if you have a customer and the customer has your customer has gone in and removed like a customer group, which is a good example. Sometimes that customer group is still on customer records, but it's not available. It doesn't exist anymore, which means that when you sync it over to CRM, it tries to look it up in another table, and if it doesn't exist, then it will fail. And also the problem is that the dual write errors, if you know what you're looking for, they are quite informative, but they are not very nice. They are sort of jarring. It's like, oh, something broke.
It's informative to someone from like us who understands the technical side of things, but to an end user, it can be quite frustrating, right?
Yes, and also I think that a big part in this is that if you're going to just do a write, then you need to sort of add the F&O business logic to CRM and the CRM business logic to F&O, which means that if you do that completely, then you will never have these errors, because then you will actually see that if you add something here and it's not complete according to the business logic rules, then your application will warn you, instead of that application that is on the other side of the dual write fence warning you in a very clumsy way and telling you that this doesn't work. Computer says no.
So. And also most important is that you know that both teams, they need to work together on a solution as soon as dual write is involved. They cannot develop in silos. It's already from start one. You need to have a linked environment where they both work together. If you like start developing something in F&O and then CE team does something on, or Dataverse team does something on their end, and then you just magically hope at the end you start all maps and it runs, that's a bad idea.
And I also think that is the reason why you get such a bad reputation, because you don't start from scratch. You start from existing CRM environments and existing F&O environments with all of the customizations, with all of the half-good master data. Because the problem is that if you have done a migration project, I can swear that there is no customer on earth who have a perfect set of master data. There are glitches in the master data.
Definitely.
And that's the problem, that dual write in very many cases require it to be perfect, because if it's not, then you will get these kind of weird errors because it doesn't understand how it works. And also, to your point, that especially if you're doing changes to the database schema, then you really need to discuss this before doing the changes, because you can, I mean that's the reason I've had a session here today, which sort of tries to explain in very broad terms how F&O works, but from a CE perspective, what we need to take into account, what's important, what can break things. And the reason why I do that session is because I don't want someone to screw up how F&O is working. I want the people on the Power Platform and CRM side to have a useful amount of respect for the fact that F&O isn't the same as what you're working with every day, and you can actually do bad damage to F&O if you're not careful, if you have them connected. And I mean that doesn't really have to do with dual write. You can do that either way, because you have access to the database schema. You can change things. So you need to understand that you are not alone in your silo anymore. There is someone else that you need to take into account.
And master data is not unique for dual write to being like the culprit of an issue. It's the culprit in many project implementations, poor quality of master data. But to your point, Johan, I think it's dangerous to use dual write as the blame guy here. It's processes that are going to clash, right? Especially, I would imagine you guys who've done dual write projects, many more than I have at least, that the issue is, of course, technical, because CE is more like customizable, so easier to deviate from the standard model, I would imagine. But also, as you say, it would be easy to go from fresh implementation. You have ERP, CE, but that must be very unusual. The most usual case must be that you have an existing CE, an existing ERP, and trying to combine them. Is that true, or is it?
It could be that way, or you have a legacy system where you then migrate data and go live with both of them.
Okay. I would actually argue, because I know that there is a migration tool for F&O for migrating code from AX 2012 into F&O. I know that there is a data migration tool. I have actually never used them, because all of our customers, when they do a upgrade from AX 2012 to FNO, what they really do is a new install. They create a completely new instance where they migrate the data in. And I have been trying to argue for a couple of years now, since dual write became like a big thing, that you should probably do the same thing. If you're doing a FNO upgrade project and you use CRM, you should probably do the same thing with the CRM. You should probably set up a completely new FNO environment with a completely blank CRM environment, because the benefit that we have on the FNO side when doing a new implementation and not just moving everything along is that we get to clean a lot of things. We need to validate the master data, as we talked before. Yeah. We need to get rid of a lot of code that we don't want anymore. So we don't have the legacy. And I think, CRM has been doing this, if not as long, it might maybe even longer than we have. So they would probably benefit as well from starting fresh.
Probably, yeah. It always depends on the situation and what data there is, but yeah, generally I would say so, because it's gonna be always a cleanup. Otherwise, you start your first initial sync with an empty FNO database, and you sync 10 records around, and you sync another 10, and then you need to just fix them. And if you have like thousands of customers, it can be quite a big task.
Yeah. The person listening to this haven't worked with dual write. One important thing that I learned very early on is that initial sync and live sync isn't the same. They don't work at all in the same way. So initial sync basically takes the data from a table, packages it in a file, sends it to Dataverse, and then Dataverse imports it. And I know that Microsoft in some cases doesn't recommend using initial sync, because especially if you have large amounts of data. But my experience is actually that initial sync, although a bit slow, works really well, and that because the recommended way for Microsoft, if you have a lot of data, is to migrate data into both environments in parallel. And the problem is that there is a big risk that data isn't perfectly aligned. You get one set of data into one environment, you have one set of data into another environment, and what actually is missing is that you have data connecting these two environments that is missing somewhere. But if you do initial sync, then the system, the dual write system, will actually fix a lot of things for you. So working especially with master data, I would say initial sync is probably the best solution to get data from one environment to another. To be honest, I haven't synced from CRM to FNO. I have only synced from FNO to CRM, and that works, in my opinion, great.
Yeah, that works definitely pretty good. If there is more records, I think the limit is 500K or something where you should consider. But if you have time, I think there's a 24-hour time window where it needs to complete the initial sync, and everything after that is it's basically aborting. But there's ways around that. You just do multiple maps with filters, for example, if you have time, right? And that's always a time critical thing.
You have 24 hours to go live, and then you're
it's not, as I said before, it's not fast, but I mean, in most cases, if you're working with, especially if you're working with, as me and Gustav mostly do, medium-sized customers, the data volume isn't that big. So as long as you do one mapping at a time, you won't end up in these issues. You will probably get a good result. It will take time. You need to plan for it. You need to schedule. Prior to go live, you need to schedule, okay, we need a couple of days to do initial sync of data.
Yeah. And you can do that like if business agrees a week before or 2 weeks before, that you just have the master data, and then at the end of go live, you just load the transactional data.
And also it actually does a pretty good job of delta syncing as well. So at least in my experience, if you do an initial sync today, and then you're going live in 3 weeks, then you can actually do a new initial sync in 3 weeks, and it will actually handle the delta fairly well. So you won't have to do a complete initial sync, but it will take what has changed. Even though the mapping hasn't been active, it will take what has changed and move it up. That's at least my experience.
All right.
You mean when you pause the maps, or?
Yeah, so if I do a complete initial sync,
Yeah.
and then I stop the map,
Okay.
and then I wait for a couple of days, and then the data eventually gets out of sync.
Yeah.
Doing another initial sync usually fixes the problem, because that's sort of frustrating when you don't want it to do an incremental sync, but you want it to do a full complete sync. Then you actually have to go into DMF and erase a lot of jobs and things to get it to work.
I'm not sure, like last time I checked, I think it was always doing a full sync, but I might be wrong. I haven't used it for a while.
So the thing is, it doesn't really, because it uses the same DMF project over and over again. If you don't remove the DMF project, it's actually reusing the same DMF project, which means that it has some kind of change tracking state awareness. I
thought the retention period was lower there, about like 3 days, but then apparently that's not the case. Then
I don't know if it's perfect, but as I said, when I've troubleshooted it at some point, I have been frustrated with the fact that it doesn't do a complete sync. It actually just does an incremental sync.
That must be like not so old yet. I think.
Yeah, exactly. Some kind of 7-day or 3-day period there. It needs to be.
No,
I would imagine.
Yeah.
Because when you actually, at least when you change like a field in the mapping, you want it to resync completely.
Complete everything.
Because otherwise you're missing data in the other system. And when it does, like, because if you have, like, say that you have a data set that is 2,000 records, and you resync it again, then it might end up saying, yeah, I synced all of your 3 records.
Yeah.
I have more.
Yeah, that's true.
But I feel a risk here with the dual write like projects, and maybe you can confirm that. And as you said as well, the 2 toolboxes or 2 teams of silos, because my experience here is that the issue might not be the technical, it might of course be technical as well, but that's solvable, right? But the process design of how we're working, let's say customer, because it's easiest, how we're working with the customer across 2 different applications, which it is, right? So it's easy, like we're doing a dual write project, and it involves setting up a map. It involves setting up technical, like discovery customizations, but does it also involve how are we going to work with the customer across these 2 applications with a classic like flowchart in Visio? Because I see a lot of those things missing, where it's like it's just enable dual write and everything will magically work, and that's never the case, right? Because you need to have an actual business process as well, hopefully close to the business process catalog. But even if it's not, that should be like the starting point. But is that your experience as well, that there's a clear understanding when you come in? Because that's not mine. It's more like here Johan, you need to enable dual write over the weekend, go ahead. And then
I have that in my slide deck for my session. I actually had a colleague of mine telling me that a CRM colleague telling me that, so dual write is something that you do on the F&O side. We don't have to care about that. And I'm like, you have not understood how this works at all. Because F&O basically don't even know that dual write is enabled. It's just there, and things gets put into its database, and hopefully everything works. But on the CRM side, everything changes. The entire structure of the data, you get company fields, you get legal entities. Yeah. Worst case, you get global address book, which is
that's quite heavy on CE side if you're not used to it.
Things changes. Yeah, and you need to be aware, and you need to understand how that affects your application.
Yeah. Also, your security rules within CE need to then apply to legal entity setup and so on. So you shouldn't start like CE first and then you're going to link it and then suddenly you have like or you install the solutions. I think there the fields come in and you start installing them, and then suddenly you have like a bunch of more fields, and your whole process you developed before doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. Because I mean that's the problem with linking an existing CRM environment, is that all of that data that you have, you need to sort of sort it into the correct structure that F&O expects it to be. Yeah. So you need to put the company field on all of your existing data, because otherwise dual write doesn't know who owns the data. Yeah. And if you do an initial sync from F&O to CRM, you will get a lot of duplicates that won't, because all of the things before doesn't have the company aspect of it. So
yeah.
Exactly. And I think, we were here 3 years ago, Johan, at Dynamics Minds. We had a session where I think one of the slides actually was ERP plus CRM equals true, with a big heart as well. I think the point with our session there was, even if you're not using dual write, you need to kind of be aware of these things, because let's say ER, another favorite topic of mine, electronic reporting. If you're doing any kind of repository, it's in Dataverse. And if you're building your own models, it's in Dataverse. So you need to have this understanding of the ALM model, and that these two applications coexist. And a lot of people miss that, okay, as you said as well, Max, that there are two business teams here. One is managing the ERP. They might be running DevOps, have a very nice little ALM model. And then you have the CRM people in another room or in another building or in another country, perhaps. You need to make these two teams work together, hopefully same stand-up, same sprints, like business applications. Just rebranding, if you have CRM and ERP, just rebranding the team to be called business applications might be a good start. And then from that point on, then you can look at enabling dual write and all that stuff. So I think a lot of people miss that, the surrounding like components here. That's not necessarily only dual write.
Yeah, fully agree. Like the electronic reporting. I mean, as soon as you start using some of the tools, you need to make sure that your deployment is also aligned, right? You cannot just do deployments on F&O. I mean, to a certain extent, you probably can, but as soon as you start modifying maps, then you need to deploy that solution for Dataverse as well. And with the combined packages now, the PPAC packages, that's going to be a lot easier, because you can build that unified package and deploy it to both instances at the same time.
Exactly. And I've been in cases where there's one partner firm managing ERP, another completely like competitor managing CRM. So that can become very interesting. Like, it's not conflict of interest. You need to work together. But those I think are the biggest obstacles right now in enabling the true like the capacity of Dataverse in business applications, rather than like the technical stuff. It works or it doesn't work, but if it doesn't work, it's probably because you broke something or you customized something. I mean, it's fixable, right? Yeah. What is more tricky to fix is your business process, probably.
Also, one thing is environment planning is also a big topic, because I think as soon as you want to start using both systems, you need to take the system which is already linked and deployed with F&O. You cannot in CE just start to deploy something and start building on it. I mean, you can, when you start setting up the environment, at least in LCS, you can pick an existing one that still works. But once it's linked, it's linked. Yeah. You need to, if you want to recreate it, you need to delete it.
Exactly.
And recreate it. Yeah.
And the concept of, I mean, on the F&O side, we very often have customers doing refreshes of data from production down to test environments. All of a sudden, you need to do that for CRM as well if you want to do it for F&O. Because if you sync just one database with production, then everything is out of sync. Then all of your test data is basically broken, because nothing will work. If you depend on end-to-end processes, then all of a sudden you have data that is existing in one environment, but doesn't exist in another.
Yeah, exactly. A good example is sales orders, when you're trying to access a sales order and suddenly you get a message.
And I mean, especially if you have people actually doing testing in your test environment, because that would introduce a lot of noise into your testing results, because they won't understand which data they should test on, because they can't test on any data. They can't choose their data by themselves. You need to specify test on this data point, because the others are broken, because this one we created.
But I mean, this is not a unique problem for it's very in your face, because when you click this button, you get an error, right? But the same problem exists for any enterprise architecture. You might have a PIM system outside, and if you're doing a DB refresh, you need to refresh that one as well, because items won't work. It's just here, hopefully we have more easier tools to kind of do the refresh at the same time. So maybe like a minute or two, one order doesn't exist, shouldn't be a problem. So it's absolutely fixable. It's just, as you say, the error pops up. So it's very clear. It's like something's broken here, but it's we can fix it with a DB refresh. It's not a unique dual write issue. It's people should be able to manage that as well with some planning. But it goes back to, as you said, ALM, environment planning. You need to think about these things. It's not just turning on a switch. You need to plan things out and have a plan as well. Yeah,
from beginning to end, basically.
Exactly,
it's like as soon as you start the project until deployment and going to production as well.
Definitely, and then life cycle afterwards. And not all of these problems will be magically fixed when everyone is in PPAC either. And it will help. I mean, being in one portal, of course, but the same issues will be there if you're not planning right.
I think the best part of that is actually it's changing the perception of what the Dynamics suite looks like.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it makes it more obvious than that this is the same environment. This is actually one environment. You can see this already in PPAC, but I'm guessing that there are a lot of F&O people who don't work in PPAC. They work in LCS. And there you don't have a clue if you have a CRM environment. You can see a URL to it, but that's about it.
Yeah, that's true.
It's more visible and obvious if you go into Power Platform Admin Center than it is from LCS.
Yeah.
And I think that might change the customer's perception that this is one suite of tools rather than two different applications.
Yeah. It also opens up a new can of worms here, I think. I had a session today about IVS, the visibility service. And just a quick question was, how do we do when we have multiple production instances? And that's very rare, right? With LCS, it's a rare scenario that you have multiple instances. It happens, but it's not very common. But in PPAC, everyone's like, I can have as many environments as I like. But you still have dual write only to one, right? Same with IVS. And that question is going to come back, I think, a little bit more. Like, how do we work with the environments and how do we move data between environments in IVS, in dual write? It's going to be, it will solve some problems, but it will open up some new problems, I think, and when we move to PPAC fully.
Yes. So we are at around half an hour, which is the length of our episode. So I think that we say thank you to you, Max. Because
thank you as well.
Thank you so much.
Great
Really
session. Having you here. It was a good talk.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.